Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Ann Marcolini. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. We're having some technical difficulties today, so the podcast will be audio only. I know most of you do absorb it that way, I think, by listening audio only. But for those of you who follow on YouTube, you're used to having the visual as well. That won't be happening today for this interview. It'll only follow as an audio. But I hope you stick with us anyway, because it's an amazing interview with an iconic Academy Award winning, Golden Globe winning actor by the name of George Chakiris. So if you're a West Side Story fan, or I mean, my goodness, I hope we're going to get into everything here today, his participation in movies with Rosemary Clooney and Marilyn Monroe and Charlton Heston and Gene Kelly. The list goes on and on. So he recently also wrote his autobiography. I hope to get into all of that here today. So allow me to say welcome, Mr. Chakiris.
Well, hi there. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. A longtime fan. And I know everybody's going to be most curious about, the Academy Award and West Side Story, but I have to go back a little bit earlier. I can't help myself. All right. I have to talk a little bit about the fact that you worked with Marilyn Monroe in a couple of movies.
Yes, well, I got to be around her a few times, but I was one of the guys behind her in the Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friends number from General for Blonde. So that was my first time around her. That's what I take for credits. It's just being able to say that I was one of the guys in that number.
How about that? Do you remember being the first day on set, like knowing you were going to be in a Marilyn Monroe film? Do you remember what that was like?
Well, I'll tell you, at the time, I was that was one of my first chorus jobs, and so I wasn't thinking about stars and so on. I was just thinking about pleasing the choreographer, because we were actually working for Jack Cole, who staged that number. And by the way, Jack Cole was her favorite choreographer. So I just remember that the thing that was most important was just doing what we were supposed to do and just doing the work, But she was, of course, just she's so young herself, and she was, as we all have learned over all these years, how stunning and beautiful she was. She was very quiet, but she was very, very impressive.
Wow, well, that was quite a way to start your career. I know you did White Christmas too, as a dancer as well, right?
That's right.
Bing Crosby, Rosemary Clooney. And it actually, could you tell the story? Because I think that a picture from White Christmas is kind of what burst you onto the scene in a big way back then.
Well, yeah, there were a couple of musical numbers on White Christmas. One of them was the Mandy number, and there were a lot of dancers in that one. It's a really huge, big production number, but Rosemary Clooney did a song called "Love You to Do Right by Me," and in that musical sequence, there were just four guys around her, so we were all more visible. And when Life magazine did a spread on White Christmas, and a full two-page color spread, and one of the pictures they had in that spread was a picture of Rosie and the four of us around her. Of course, nobody knew who we were, but I got a lot of fan mail just from that picture in Life magazine of girls wanting to know who I was, and thanks to those letters, Paramount decided they would screen test me, and because of that, they signed me to a 7-year contract. So it was a really a great thing that happened.
Oh yeah, I mean, you got to do a lot of big kind of musicals even at the time. I know, and MGM used you, I think, in Country Girl and right, or.
Yeah, working as a dancer in the beginning was just was such a great thing because you got to be in wonderful musical numbers around that were created for stars like Rosemary and Marilyn and Bing Crosby and gosh, it was a very exciting time. I was just in the background, but I didn't mind that. I loved every second of it. It was great.
Do you have a favorite story from those years, from trying to film, let's say, White Christmas? Is there a favorite like on set moment for you?
Ask me that again, honey. I didn't quite understand.
Sure. Like, when you were filming White Christmas, do you have like a favorite moment that you remember doing the filming on that?
Well, I'll tell you, I loved the whole thing. The choreographer for that film was a man called Robert Alston, and all the dancers in town loved working for him. So just working for Bob Alton was incredible, and being in two of the numbers was great too. Just being in that movie and just being one, I got to be an extra in it as well. Some of the dancers who were in the numbers were also used in some of the scenes, just as background. But that whole experience was just so much fun. All the stars, Bing Crosby, Rosemary, Kaye, and Vera Ellen. I think they all had such a great time too. They seemed all to really love working with each other and laughed and giggled, and there was just a beautiful atmosphere to that movie altogether. Everyone had a great time.
And it's still a classic, right? I mean, you every Christmas you can watch that movie.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about White Christmas. Absolutely, it's every year we can see it if we want.
Now there comes a point in time where you decide to, I guess, head for New York, right, and try out for a play, like to be on stage.
Yeah, well, and I remember the year, sort of the middle of 1958. There were not musical movies were beginning to not be as frequent, so the dancers in town didn't have as much work as they needed. And what I decided to do, and a few of us decided to do, was go to New York. Just go to New York. And I have a couple of friends who had gone to New York before me, and they let me stay on the couch in their living rooms, right, a place to stay. And they also knew everything that was going on in New York. And one of the things that was going on at that time, West Side Story was just coming, West Side Story in the theater was just coming to its first year anniversary. And so they were auditioning people to replace kids who were going to leave the show. And they were also auditioning, they were also forming a London company. So I got to New York at just an incredibly lucky time, and I got to audition for West Side Story for replacements in the theater or for the London company, and I ended up being hired to work in the London company. I was hired to play Riff in the London company, and wow, that was so exciting.
And then, what I found really interesting when I was doing, some research before today's interview is that I would have thought that they would have when it came time for the film and you went to audition for the film, that the likely role would have been the one that you had been already playing in the play.
Yes, yeah.
Right? But instead, they move you to a different character.
Well, what happened was, like, when I was in the show in London, I'd been in it for a year and a half, so it was a nice long time. I got a letter from United Artists saying that they would like to test me for the film, and they asked me to pick a scene as Riff and a scene as Bernardo. So I tested initially for both parts, and then the second time around, they asked me to do a screen test as Bernardo. That was the first time I met Bob Wise, and John Robbins, who had conceived and choreographed the stage version, directed that test. So they started off thinking of me as Riff, but then when they saw us on film, they thought I might be more appropriate for the role of Bernardo.
And then, the cast, right, of when the movie comes together for West Side Story, and your cast, I mean, you have Natalie Wood, you have Rita Moreno. I mean,
Yeah.
this is some cast coming together for the movie. Do you remember your first day on set?
Oh, well, I'll tell you what I remember is my first day at rehearsal, because it was the first day I met Natalie, and it was also the first day I met Rita. I had never met any of them before, and it was just a very high energy happening altogether. It was really exciting. Natalie was darling, a huge star, of course, and she's so beautiful in that film. But she's such a lovely person. I just remember being taken by her as the lovely young woman that she was, and professional and talented and all of that. And meeting Rita meeting all the other kids for the first day of rehearsal was just exciting. But it was the first time I met Rita as well, and of course we got to know each other really well over the years, and have been friends ever since.
Oh, wow. Now that's wonderful that you stayed in touch after that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the scenes, you know, were, I mean, when I watch West Side Story, and I've watched it many times, what's interesting to me is there's this balance of drama, right? And then music, you know, which is not common for me, what I consider to be a musical. Like most musicals, if you will, are happy-go-lucky, you know, it's just a feel-good kind of Gene Kelly-esque kind of experience. But this was one of the first times I can remember seeing on film, you know, where there's a lot of drama and yet the music, right? That certainly felt like a different vibe, didn't it?
Well, it did actually, because it's West Side Story is based on the Romeo and Juliet story theme, and then brought forward to modern times. Instead of the Montagues and the Capulets, it was the Sharks and the Jets. So
Right.
it was about competing gangs who were both looking for their place to make the city their home, and how one gang was trying to dominate the other. So, and also the love story between Tony and Maria. It became dramatic, so to speak, because it was dramatic. It was the Jets were not accepting the Puerto Ricans into the city, so there became a conflict, a real kind of conflict that was actually going on. And then the beautiful thing, one of the beautiful things I think about the movie of West Side Story is the Leonard Bernstein score and Stephen Sondheim lyrics. So the music was very different from the kinds of music that were heard in movie musicals in previous years. It had fun and tempo and upbeat stuff, but it was dramatic. And Leonard Bernstein's score is, as we all know now, is very classic and very beautiful.
What was the hardest scene to film?
I think the hardest scene, the prologue in New York, we filmed that on location in New York, and so we were dancing on hard surfaces, on cement, on streets, and that was a little more difficult than a studio floor that kind of gave with your body. But so I would say the prologue, but so it was difficult in that sense. But for example, the American number was not easier. It had a whole total different spirit to it, and there was so much fun in the American number between the guys and the girls. So just the spirit and the drama of the different numbers created a different kind of tension and a kind of different work ethic as well.
Was there any one scene that you can remember? Now they'd call them bloopers, right? But that you guys you kept breaking out in laughter, and you just had a hard time getting the scene done?
Oh, well, the American number and the dance at the gym, because in both of those there were lots of kids around, but the American number especially was such great fun. between takes, we laughed and we played a lot. And there were just a couple of takes where Bob Wise and Jerry Robbins allowed us to play and to on purpose make mistakes. So, but the nature of that number allowed that kind of playfulness to go on and still be keep the spirit of the number and the work going too. But so the American number was the one where we sort of got to play around more between takes and have fun that kind of almost disrupted things now and again, but it never disrupted the work.
Do you remember the moment you learned you had been nominated for an Academy Award for your role?
God, yes, I do. That was in early 1962. Bob Wise and Russ Tamlin and Richard and I were in London for the Royal Command performance. West Side Story was the Royal Command performance for the Queen that year. And so there was a screening. We all met the Queen. That was incredible. And there was an intermission of the screening that night. And during the intermission, we were waiting around for the intermission to be over. But during that intermission, Bob Wise had been on the phone with the West Coast, and that was when he found out that that the West Side had received the nominations it had received, and one of them was for me. So that was the first time I heard about that, knew about that. But it was during that intermission that Bob told me of that, that we had been nominated for anything. It was great.
That had to be pretty exciting. I mean, that's such an an amazing award to receive, to be the recipient of. Just knowing you had been nominated had to be a great feeling.
Well, I'll tell you, it was incredible. It's sort of it was hard to appreciate the how wonderful it was, because it was. Listen, I had been a dancer in Hollywood movie musicals, and then I was lucky enough to be in West Side Story Theater, and then lucky enough to be in the film, and then now lucky enough to be nominated for an award. It was you almost couldn't take it all in. It was just phenomenal,
Can you talk to me about the night, the night that you win, like the Academy Awards, hearing your name?
Oh God, well, yeah, Rita and I, we were really great friends by this time, so we were both nominated, and we went to the awards together. The car came and got me first, and then we went to Rita, and when she came out of her door, she said, "I'm practicing my loser's face." She's very funny, and we both got lucky that night. It was such an incredible night to attend that together, and then to both be such great friends and to both get lucky together. It was an extraordinary. It was just. I can't describe how beautiful that evening was. It was perfect. Gosh, I've lost track of where I was going with this, but I hope that answers your question in some way.
Well, it does. I mean, I can't imagine, of course, what's going through your mind. I mean, I'm sure you're just nerve-wracked. It's hard enough knowing everyone's staring at you, I guess, while they're calling the names out. But
I just now remembered, what my acceptance speech and Rita's were probably the two shortest speeches ever, because we've all learned in the years after how people give quite long acceptance speeches. They thank their families, the production company, that they thank a lot of people. I was green, and I didn't understand any of that, so all I could say was thank you. I mean, that was I was too unaware and too sort of carried away to think of anything else. But and the bottom line is that's what I really needed to say, was to say thank you. I didn't thank specific people. I just said thank you very, very much. So it was short. And Rita's acceptance speech was lucky too. I guess she felt the same.
Wow, that's really, what more can you say? I mean, I'm sure you can thank specific people, but at the point that that you're up there receiving the award, it really is acknowledgement of your work in particular.
It was and still is an extraordinary blessing. You know, it's great.
And it puts you in a rather small elite group of actors, actresses, celebrities who've actually achieved that level of success, who've actually won that award. Given the amount of people that have been in your profession, there's a very small group who've been acknowledged in that way. So
yeah, it is. It's again, it's just such it's such an extraordinary thing to experience, and to have happen, and so the good fortune that comes with it as well. It was just an incredible moment, you know. I realized it more after the fact than while it was happening, you know.
Oh, sure. I think hindsight always does that for us.
Yeah.
Now, you also then went on to work with other, major people in the industry. I have to just touch upon, you worked with Gene Kelly.
Yes.
Who arguably is the greatest dancer, maybe, ever.
Yeah, we all know, and of course it's absolutely true. The two incredible male dancers in film, of course, were Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. They were very different in style, but they're both phenomenal, and they created both of them. It was very unique and special and beautifully orchestrated musical numbers for film. I mean, Gene was a pioneer, and his camera work was great. There's so many things about Gene that were wonderful, aside from what he actually did himself, because he created the numbers. And anyway, yeah. So I didn't get to dance around Fred Astaire, but I did get to work around Gene Kelly in a movie called Brigadoon, and that was still when I was a chorus dancer. But I did work with Gene on that one, and he was just so great to work for. He's really nice and really took care of the dancers, you know.
And did you do a movie with Catherine Deneuve and Gene?
I did. It's called the Young Girls of Rochefort. I think that was 1966. Yeah. I didn't know who anybody was, but I got to do that movie, and of course I found out who everybody was, and that's still that's one of my favorite movies that I ever got to be in still, because Jacques Demy, the French director, the guy who created that movie, had already done a wonderful movie with Catherine called the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and that got worldwide attention. It was a beautiful, beautiful film, and of course Catherine was extraordinary in it. But so he did this film called The Young Girls of Rochefort, again with Catherine and her sister, her real life sister, Françoise Dorléac, and of course Gene. So I had worked with Gene on Brigadoon just as a dancer, but this time I got to be around it, and we were both featured performers in the film. So it's so funny how things happen, you know.
And was it different between the experience, with one when you were more of a like in the background and then being a feature? Did your interaction with him change a lot?
Well, I'll tell you, no, it wasn't really different, because the thing that you think about, no matter your position is, or what your position on a film, is the work itself. So you're really concentrated on what you're doing, and that's your focus is all on the job at hand. And there was a lot more for me to do in the Young Girls of Rochefort. Of course, there was a lot than there was in Brigadoon, where I was just a dancer in one number. And the Young Girls of Rochefort, I was a featured player, and I was in a lot of the musical numbers. So there was a lot to learn, and it was great. All of it was, it's funny. It's hard work, but it's just so much fun, you know.
And you did it well. Yeah. Did you have a background in dancing? Were you trained?
Well, I, as a kid, I grew up, like a lot of kids, watching movie musicals and that kind of thing. And so I'd always loved that. But my first opportunity to study dance didn't happen until I was 19. I was living in Long Beach, my family and I living in Long Beach, and one of the girls I was at school with told me about a ballet school in Hollywood called the American School of Dance, and she said, Leslie Caron, Cyd Charisse take class there. Well, that's all I had to hear. So I went there one day to watch a professional class one morning. Nobody famous in class, but when I saw that class, I knew that I wanted to study there, and I did. So I started dancing late, but it wasn't too late for me. But that was how I actually took my first professional class.
Well, you're a quick learner then.
Wow. I don't know. Maybe, when you love something that much, I guess you learn more quickly than you think you could. But I never stopped to think about how quickly I learned anything. But it was just such a beautiful time. I loved going to that school and just being a dancer taking class.
Now, you also worked with, I want to say Charlton Heston in a movie, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, a movie called Diamond's Head. That it was when we were working on Diamond's Head that I found out about that I left the filming for just a few days to attend the Academy Awards that year. But Diamond's Head, I love Diamond's Head. I have to tell you, Charlton Heston, never really called him Chuck, was one of the most gracious people you'd ever want to meet. The thing that I liked about him really a lot was that his wife was with him the whole time we were working on that film, and they had a beautiful, beautiful marriage. And he didn't overlord anything. He was just there, like everybody else, doing his work. And he always took a yellow legal pad to him to rushes, so that when he watched himself in the rushes, he would make notes to keep working on his performance as the days went on. But he's just one of the nicest people you ever want to meet. In 1978, I was in London at the Queen's Theatre doing a play called The Passion of Dracula. I played Dracula, and that was a great time. But Chuck and his wife came to see the show, and they came backstage. We got to see each other again. We took pictures together. But again, he was just such a gracious, lovely, lovely man.
Wow. That's still that. How many people get to say that they actually worked with Charlton Heston?
Yes, really. He's so impressive on film. He's got a really beautiful sculpted face. He's a wonderful actor, but he has a great face as well.
And you also worked with Cliff Robertson, another big actor in his day.
Oh God, Cliff, he was so great. With Cliff, there was not an ego inside. He was just there for the work, and he was really easy to work with and be around. And I didn't get to know him well, but I knew him well enough to know that I really liked him. He was a pilot too. The 63 Squadron was about their incredible flying sequences in that film, and Cliff was a flyer and owned his own aircraft privately. But it's just that he came to work like anybody else, no fuss, nothing like that, just there doing what he was supposed to do, and so easy to be around.
Wow. Still, yeah, he had a series of great movies too. A big actor, definitely a big actor.
Yes.
You were interacting with some of the top. You did another film with Yul Brynner and Richard Widmark.
Right. The first one, I did two movies with Yul, and the first one was Flight from Ashia. We filmed it in Japan, and it was with Yul, of course, and Richard Widmark. Both extraordinary guys, and both so different as people and the way they worked. It was really interesting to see that, because Richard was very private and didn't socialize. The most important thing to Richard was, of course, the work. He was great. He was so beautifully professional, and I spent a lot of my time, my role in that film, sitting next to him. So he was a lesson. I learned a lot from watching him.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that would be true. Right. Never having, been at that level, I can't even imagine it. But I imagine learning from people like that has to be a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I was still too naive to even realize what was happening to me, that I was in these movies starring above the title with people like that. It didn't hit me. I was just doing my work and having the wonderful opportunity to meet people like that.
And then you wound up working, I think you transitioned towards some TV projects with Jose Ferreira, I think brings you into Kismet, I want to say.
Yeah, well, I loved Kismet with Jose Ferreira and Ana Maria Alberghetti and Hans Conried. Yeah, Kismet was it's a beautiful show. Barbara Eden was in it. Wow, she was so gorgeous. She's so wonderful in it. But again, one of the things I loved about Kismet was the part I played, the Caliph Prince, had, of course, to sing. And most people don't, when they think of me, they don't think of me as a singer, but I don't know how to say this, but singing was also another talent that I had. And in Kismet, Ana Maria Alberghetti and I do a duet of a beautiful song called Stranger in Paradise. But so the music was beautiful, and it was I loved doing it. I got someone who restored it, and we got to a screening of it just about a few months ago. So it was nice to see it restored in color and all of that, and just be reminded what a nice piece it was.
And then eventually you wound up in, a medical center in a dramatic role.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll never. Gosh, medical center, you just get to work with wonderful people. Frank Glicksman was the producer of that show, and I think I did 3 of them. And I can't, television at that stage of the game was using wonderful directors and people from the great Warner Brothers movies, and I can't think of his name right now, but one of the episodes was directed by one of the great Warner Brothers directors who'd done movies with Bette Davis and everything, but people moved on to where the work was, and a lot of the time that was an episodic television. And so some of those episodic television shows were really wonderful, good quality, and great to do.
Yeah, that.
Oh, I just remembered that director's name. His name is Vincent Sherman, and if you look him up, you'll see he's credited with some really incredible movies at Warner Brothers with Bette Davis. Yeah.
How did you find the transition because at that point you'd been on the stage, you'd been in film, and now you'd moved to television. So you're kind of, hitting all the bells, like for the different areas. How did you find that transition?
Well, the thing with television is that it moved very quickly. Movies go more slowly. There's more attention to detail because it has they have a longer shooting schedule. Television, because it's episodic every week, things move more quickly. So that was the basic challenge, as it were, for everybody, for the writers, for the producer, and for the actors, to just memorize and learn and move more quickly. But it was still depending on the script. Everything depends on the script. And if you have a script that you like, you can always have a good time. But making it, so it wasn't really a transition of any kind. It was still film, if you like. Television was still, you were there with the camera in the room. It was on film. So it didn't feel different. It just moved a bit more quickly.
Do you have a favorite genre? I mean, where you enjoyed mostly, like being on stage or being in film or TV?
Gosh, I think I've been on stage. Theater is I love theater more than anything. And once you're doing theater work, once rehearsal over, and you're on stage. If the only people are in control at that stage are the people on stage, and so but there's something really wonderful about being on stage with a live audience, and that and trying to please that audience. And also, you never know what can happen in the course of an evening. Things do happen. People make mistakes. Things go wrong. So you're always on the ball in a way that you have to be. And in film, you can relax a little bit more if you like, because if anybody makes any mistake, you can cut and start again. In film, and in the theater, you can't cut and start again. It has to be right from beginning to end, no matter what happens.
And the energy, right? You must get a lot of the, your energy from the crowd.
Exactly. You're so right. That's a great way to put. Thank you for that. The energy from the crowd, because there absolutely is energy from an audience, and when something in the theater is going well, you really feel that energy.
What was it like to work with Stephen Sondheim?
Well, I worked. He was with us, of course, for West Side Story in London, and then I also did Company, beautiful Stephen Sondheim musical. I did it for a year with Elaine Stritch, and wow, I could talk about Elaine Stritch for a week. She's so, oh God, that's one of my favorite things ever, was working almost a year on that show, on a Stephen Sondheim show with Elaine Stritch. But Stephen was wonderful. He's so articulate, he's so knowledgeable, and he's so nice. He's just a great person to be around when you're working on anything. He's constructive, he's helpful, but always in a generous, positive way. He's phenomenal, certainly as a talent, of course, but also as a person.
There's got to be a little story behind this, so I have to ask. Maybe there's none, and I'll be surprised. But when the Partridge Family came to an end, like the very last episode is you kissing, Shirley Jones, and that's kind of how the series ends in general. Is there a story behind how that came about?
Well, I said, just coincidentally, Shirley was presented me with the Academy Award that I won, but I didn't know her at that time. But while she was doing the Partridge Family, at that time, Shirley and I both had the same representation, personal manager, a woman called Ruth Aarons. So when the last episode of Partridge Family was coming up, I don't know whose idea it was, but they cast me as the romantic interest to Shirley in that episode. And again, Shirley Jones, here's another sort of a great person in life. She's so that beautiful voice, that beautiful face. She's so talented, but she's just one of the nicest people in the world. So I was really glad that I got to be on any show with Shirley, but that it turned out to be the final episode of the Partridge Family just made it much more fun. And we became friends after that. I got to go to her house. I met Ryan when he was just 6 months old. And so I met her and the boys and Jack, and we socialized with each other a lot. It was just a great time.
That's such a great story. Oh, yes, I figured. I mean, there has to be a little something there, a little behind the scenes story for that. Like she rides off into the sunset, I guess, with you at the end. Just kind of cool.
Ask me that again. I'm so sorry.
No, I said I was just commenting that I knew it was kind of a cool thing that that whole show kind of comes to an end with you kind of fading to black with her.
Yeah. It was it was more than fun, but it certainly was fun just to be around. And David, I mean, it was a tremendous show.
Sure. I mean, and you did a few episodes, I think, at least, of Dallas. So I have to ask, what was that set like?
Gosh, you know what? Dallas, I would sound like a broken record. Dallas was a great set. I was hired to do one episode. Barbara Carrera was really the guest of that season, but I was hired to play a guy who was in cahoots with her in the story. And by the way, she was incredible. One of those beautiful women you'd ever want to see. But she was funny. She was so great to work with. But Dallas was a great set. It had been running for a long time, so it was so incredibly organized. Everything was perfect. Nobody ever had a problem on Dallas because it was so organized. The producer was great to work for. Everybody in the cast, it was just one of those. And I went on, instead of doing one episode, I think I did 11 of them. So I got to be on that set for a nice, good time. And honestly, it was great. It was just an incredibly organized and beautifully run and organized show altogether.
And Larry Hagman, how was he off camera?
Well, I had no scenes with Larry Hagman, so I got to socialize with him between takes. And he was great. What can I say? He was just very friendly, very nice, as people are in those situations. And that's all I got to know about him. But he was very friendly and really gracious, and invited any guest on the show in a really gracious, nice way.
And recently, you appeared in the film Not to Forget with a lot of yeah.
Well, I did a whole day on that movie. That movie is about Alzheimer's, and Olivia Dukakis was not a great friend, but she was a friend. Was also on that. When I found out that Olivia was doing it, and they asked me to do it, and also when I knew what it's about, I thought I would like to do that. I hadn't done anything for a long time, so I spent the day, well, almost 2 days on that. And I appreciated that film, and again, the subject of the film.
Sure. I mean, Lou Gossett Jr., Tatum O'Neal, Cloris Leachman, yes. There were other Academy Award winners with you. It's definitely an important topic, and a very valuable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
A valuable service, I think, to the world at large, the kind of attention a movie like that and fundraising, brings to the world. So, thank you for that. Yeah. I thought that was a really important project for you to be involved in.
Well, it was just the subject matter is I think we're much more aware of these kinds of things in today's world than we used to be. So more attention on that dilemma, so to speak, and the more we learn about it, the better. Absolutely.
Did you have a creative process bringing the character? Because, I think your industry, I say this many times on the podcast, is very collaborative. All right. So, yeah. I mean, it's not just one person, like a writer who's writing a novel. It's just them. They're behind their computer, and that's all there is to it. But, people involved in film, they're the writers who make up the paper version of the characters. And then, of course, the actors who bring them to life, and the cinematographer, and who's like the visual storyteller who brings us through the story. And then the editor who picks the right scene, the right cut.
Yes.
What was your process for bringing the character off the paper and breathing life into them?
Well, the thing that I kind of automatically try to do is to try and imagine what that character is feeling at any moment of time, because I think the most important thing for an audience to appreciate about any character on screen is how they feel, and that's always been one of the first ways I approach a character, because to me, I think it is the most important, is what is that character feeling at that moment and in that scene. And when you try to hook into that, it helps you come up with those feelings, and it helps you in your performance.
Yeah, it's because it's not, I think I think actors, you guys bring the nuances to the characters, right? That you don't get to see on paper. The little quirky things that make them ultimately become who they are. And that's not an easy task either. That definitely takes your own level of creativity. You have to try to figure out, you know, who this person is and how I'm going to make them unique.
Yeah, and the thing that I notice when I watch things now is notice I appreciate what actors bringing more than probably was on paper, bringing more than that to their performance, and those things, those additional things that actors bring to their performance usually happens in rehearsal, because you have to be you have to rehearse something to feel it and find it and play off of other people, and other people play off of you, and that's how everybody develops and brings more than what is on paper to what they're doing, because it's again it's about people and about feelings and the interplay between characters.
Right. Now, I'm a tremendous Natalie Wood fan as well.
Yeah.
And so I have to ask, do you have a favorite Natalie Wood anecdote or story you could share?
Oh God, I have a few, but you know, when I was working on West Side Story, Harold Mirisch, one of the producers, had a gathering at his evening, a social gathering, and I was invited. Natalie was there, Melinda McCoy, there were lots of people there, and Natalie and I were chatting about something, and she knew that my next movie for the Mirisch Company was going to be Kings of the Sun, which of course you could classify that as a costume picture. And Natalie herself had experiences in her early career of having to do a couple of, I'll say, costume pictures that she didn't like. And basically she basically said to me, don't do a costume picture. that was her advice. and that was just for that evening. But I got to be around Natalie quite a few times. Listen, she was sweet. She was intelligent. She was so talented, and she understood the business really well, even though she was only 23 or 24 herself. I mean, because she had been in movies starting from a very young age. So, but the main thing to me, and I think is what I noticed with almost everyone, is what a darling, lovely person she was. She was just stunningly beautiful. I mean, she was perfect to look at, but she was also perfect as a person. She understood the challenges of life, the challenges of being a star, the challenge of fame, all of that, and she understood all of that at a really young age. That's how intelligent she was.
Yeah. I believe it, you know, a great loss, unfortunately, passing so young.
Great loss. Yes.
Now let's talk a little bit about you've maneuvered, I guess, a little bit away from the entertainment business to be an entrepreneur, right, into jewelry.
Yeah.
So
yes. Well, I don't know exactly how I started, but a while ago, it's probably like 30 years or something now. There's a wonderful school here in town called Barnstall. It's more like a miniature university, and they teach different kinds of things that people have access to if they want. They teach sculpting, painting, jewelry making, different things. And I went there and opted to take the jewelry making course, and I loved it from the first moment. The idea of making jewelry just really fascinated me. I've always loved making things, and so I got hooked, so to speak. And going on beyond that, I got to know almost everybody downtown in the jewelry district just to find my way. And I had manufacturers down there that I worked with, and not too long after I'd created some of my pieces, a Japanese distributor liked my stuff and wanted to represent me in Japan, and he's been representing me there ever since. So that's how things happen. They start small, and then if you're lucky, they build and become more. But the thing I love, the creativity of jewelry is what I love. As actors, you work on the stage, but everything you do is ultimately for an audience. Well, it's the same with jewelry. I think you work on something, you design something, you make something, but what you hope for, you hope it will please an audience, because no matter what we do it for other people and for an audience, and we hope to be successful that way. So jewelry has been just a lot of work, but just the creativity of it, and actually making something that when you actually make it and you've completed the process, you can actually hold it in your hand. There's just something very gratifying about that.
Sure. I mean, I liken it to no different really than somebody who does create a sculpture or even a painting, right? You have to have the same idea, the same spark, and in advance of what you want to create, and then put it in tangible form.
Yeah, exactly. And I think most artists, again, no matter what the art form, they hope to please an audience, and I think
sort of the same. Now, the last thing I'm going to bother you with, there's some questions about your autobiography.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. Well, I wrote that book with a wonderful writer whose name is Lindsay Harrison, and that kind of is really because you have to review your life, and that was really so interesting to me, because it reminded me of, generally speaking, for me, when something is over, I tend to forget it. But doing this book with Lindsay, of course, I had to try to remember as much as I could. And I did remember a lot. And the thing I remembered overall was just how lucky I am to have done what I've been able to do, and to meet the people I've met, and to work with the people I've worked with. And then, most importantly, my family. I have such an incredible family. My mother and father are the two most beautiful people on the planet. So I got to think about all of that and spend time thinking about them again, and spending time with all of that. And that was the good part of doing a book.
What made you decide to finally do it? I imagine people were chasing you to do it for, decades.
Well, yeah, you're in a room with friends, and people are telling stories back and forth, and sometimes someone will say, that's a funny story, you should write a book, So I heard things like that, but it took actually my Lindsay Harrison, who has become a good friend. It was Lindsay who convinced me that maybe that I could write a book, because I don't think of myself that way. But so it was her encouragement that made me think it was something that I could do, and have it mean anything at all,
Well, I mean, I'm happy that you did it. It's definitely an amazing read that I highly recommend. You tell some great stories in the book, and I'll definitely put a link up, for anyone. Again, if you read it all, this is a biography you don't want to miss. Do you have what's your favorite or most memorable moment in your career that you'd say? No, I mean, not with your family, obviously. Your most memorable moments are going to be family related, but
I think the most memorable, because to me it bore wonderful fruit, was meeting and auditioning and working with Jerome Robbins. Jerry was we could comfortably use the word genius in connection with him. He was extraordinary, and I was so lucky to, first of all, audition for him, work with him on the London Company of West Side Story, and work with him on the film. His work ethic and his perfectionism and the beauty of what he did, to me, is phenomenal. And I think of him quite often. I didn't get to know him personally very well, but I didn't need to. I really felt him in a way. I think, and that's one of the reasons I think West Side Story turned out well for me, was thanks to him.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. You know, I realized too that I forgot to ask about, but I'm going to throw it in now, as I have to know, because you did The Country Girl with Grace Kelly and William Holden, of course. And I mean, till today, Grace Kelly is still, read about, sought after, still in the news. If you can imagine, her family, and they still talk about her. What was that like?
Well, yeah, I was an extra one day in The Country Girl, so I got to be around them for part of the day, and that was all. But I'm an admirer of Grace Kelly and her work on film, and of course we know about her private life and being princess and all of that. So she had an extraordinary life herself, and she was one of those beautiful women on film ever as well. So there's a lot to be said. One of my favorite movies is Rear Window.
Oh yeah,
an Alfred Hitchcock movie, and I love the movie, but of course James Stewart and Grace Kelly, they're so phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, you've had such an illustrious career. I mean, you've worked with, it just doesn't get much bigger than the people you've worked with at the upper echelons. And you've been a great performer. I mean, what you've given, and the entertainment, I always say the entertainment business is highly underrated, because you never know what people are going through in their life. And they need that, right? They need to be able to watch a movie, or maybe go to a show and be entertained and forget about whatever problems they have. It's an invaluable service you've provided across your lifetime.
Well, I love what you just said. You never know what people are going through in their life. And it's true, the people on the screen, the people off the screen, you never know what anybody is going through. And it's hearing you say that makes me appreciate you, because that's a wonderful thought.
Yeah, and I say thank you to you. I mean, thank you for the billions of fans who love you, and will never get this chance to have a conversation with you and say thank you, because you brought a lot of joy in my life. You've been involved in so many different things, entertainment wise, whether, like I said, somebody's seen you on the stage, or they've seen you in a film or in a TV show, and you've always given 100%. And most of the material that you have created is iconic, right? It's timeless. I still can watch West Side Story, anytime you want. You can catch it on, any of the streaming platforms. A lot of the stuff that you've done will last forever. It's absolutely timeless, and you were pretty brilliant in everything. So thank you.
Well, God, thank you so much for that. That's so nice of you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really wonderful, lots of fun as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being a guest. And I know you're busy, and I'm sorry I had to chase your publicist down to try to get you.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and joining me. And I'm going to let you go. The hour flew by. But thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your time, and I enjoyed this chat.
Thank you so much. Ditto. I appreciate you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.